See, this is one of the seven warlords who is cool. No, he likes to play games a little bit. you know, Doflamingo of the seven warlords. So his journey started from above. See, he was a celestial dragon. He was from that shit. Um, these people who are, brainwashed, told that they are, the best people. Everybody else is filth. You wear a bubble around your head because breathing in the oxygen of somebody else is beneath you. You are a celestial dragon. You are holy blood. You live in the holy land of Marichwa. Now, his father was, more willing to understand other people. So he was like, why don't we ever live down there? And the other celestial giants are like, why the fuck are you trying to go down there? And he's like, no, let's go down there. And he took his family and they left. They had to like basically leave their title too, of, celestial dragon too, because they didn't want, like, anybody who wanted to go down there is, they're now lesser people. They ain't celestial dragons anymore. Doflamingo, wasn't heeding calls to it. He was like, we won't be treated right and other things. We already have a great life here. Why the fuck will we go down here? I am, a brat. Like, why the fuck are we going down here? His dad's like, you have to understand other people, son. And he had another, son too, called Rosinante. You know, Don Quixote Rosinante. And see, the Don Quixote family was a family that was, a family that ruled for a long time. They had great, status in Marijua and elsewhere too. So that'll play later on, in this story. But Doflamingo, long story short, his mother died, and then he was like, "Father, I told you that this was not a good idea, and you keep playing games." Then they got strung up, him, his brother, and his father, and homing Don Quixote was like, leave my sons alone and kill me instead. I understand you don't like us people. And Doflamingo was like, he killed everybody, knocked them out, with his conqueror's hockey. That was when he knew that he was built different, you know. And then not just that, other people showed up in his life and was like, here, you can have this gun and this devil fruit. You become a king. We'll bow our heads to you and you are, you are a guy and shit. And he was like, okay, this sounds cool. And he did that, and that's what he did. He killed his father, and his brother was like, there. He's like, don't worry about it. Our father was weak and foolish. You follow me, you'll be all right. And that was true. However, the kingly ambitions of Doflamingo became more, ruthless and very twisted. It reflected in the devil fruit as well. The devil fruit he had obtained was called the string fruit, and through years of mastery, he was able to, use it to his advantage in great ways. Um, Basically, you can make people do stuff. That saying that you're tugging on people's heartstrings, or you're pulling people by the strings and other things. That's what he does. And he does that a lot. you know, and he ain't just devil fruit relying either. He has, like I said, hockey, conquers hockey, which is like a feat that very few people have. So he had the Don Quixote family around him, the people that he picked up, or saw him and saw, his conquer spirit, and they were like, we have to like make sure we keep this guy cool, you know. And any time that Doflamingo got fucked with by anybody, like say somebody pushed him or like nudged him the wrong way, stepped on his foot just passing through, like just accidentally too, like not on some like I want to hurt that kid, just it accidentally happened. They were in a rush, they would go kill that person. They'd be dead. And then that made Doflamingo even more crazy and shit. And he did like shit like this for years, tormenting people's lives and other things. Eventually, he found a boy named Law, and he was expanding his family. The Don Quixote pirates. And his brother Rosinante, was on the side. He was playing Marine on the side. Sengoku know about Rosinante. You know, Doflamingo was after, certain things, cures, not cures, but, Law needed a cure for his disease. So his brother Rosinante was going after that devil fruit called the op fruit, you know. Really, he was finding, other cures, but then he found that devil fruit. And that devil fruit was powerful. Dofi wanted it for his purposes too. But he killed his brother, you know, for trying to save Law and doing with Law what he wanted, when Doflamingo wanted Law for basically just another person that he can, tell what to do. Kill these people for me. Do this for me. I'm your king. I am, Doflamingo. I'm that guy and shit. You have to bow your head to me. And not doing that is gonna get you cut the fuck up or dead. And Dofi, you know, kept playing games. Law went and he created his own crew and other stuff, right? But he took over the kingdom of Dressrosa from a guy named Riku. Riku family had control of, Dressrosa for a long time. But a long time ago, Doflamingo's family did rule over Dressrosa, that kingdom, that island. So he was like, I'm taking back what's rightfully mine, because I'm part of the Don Quixotes, celestial dragons and all that extra stuff. Your family might have ruled for the past hundreds of years, but I'm taking back what's actually mine. And that guy's like, no, this doesn't make sense. And he's like, well, it does make sense if, I kill your people and other things. So you'll have to get you'll have to get me like, I think it was like 500 million berries. He's a pirate, Doflamingo is too. And he's like, oh, I guess I'll make it happen. I don't want my kingdom or my people to be hurt, you know. But in doing this, he had another twisted idea. He'll make King Riku look like the villain, and he'll come in and be the hero. See, he has the strings, so he can make King Riku run around and kill his own citizens, take their money and other things. And then he's like, King Riku was, somebody who didn't care about you people. He didn't love you enough. I am Doflamingo. I will take over and I'll actually help this kingdom out. Let me be your new king. And he basically was. But it was a kingdom ruled on lies and deceit, and him, playing games with all kind of people's lives. Colosseum members, people fighting at the Colosseum until they died, just like in Roman days. And then people, who, spoke out against him and other shit, turned into toys, and then their families forget about them. Side effects of a Del fruit that Sugar has, one of his crew members, and he was doing this for a while. But he was also doing other stuff. See, like I said, Doflamingo was, of celestial blood. He became one of the 7 warlords of the sea. When he did that, he was running around like he owned shit for real too. He was everywhere. He was at the meeting when, Luffy got a bounty. That was, high. 100 million for a rookie pirate. And he was there. he learned about Luffy, and he was like, okay, this guy took down Crocodile. What's the big deal? My bounty's worth 340 million. And that's a frozen bounty for me. And he he wasn't worried about it. And he was playing games with the like officers, that were in there, making them want to hurt each other. And then Sengoku was like, calm down, you can't be doing shit like that here. You have to stand down and not fuck around like that. But he gets enjoyment from that. He plays games that way. Twisted mind and other things. But he, was eventually, at Mocktown too. After, Luffy had been there too, but he showed up afterwards. And he found out about, Bellamy playing games and getting his ass kicked by Straw Hat. And he was like, you lost to a rookie pirate who, was weak. You are not strong. You ain't even strong enough to be a part of my family. He was like, no, no, don't do it. And, watching that scene for the first time and other things, you thought that Bellamy was dead, but Bellamy wasn't dead. He just got cut down. And, he learned his lesson that he has to bow to Doflamingo different ways and other things. And Doflamingo was then at the War of the Best, Marine Corps, except he was on the side of, the warlords and the government. He cared about his title, probably more than everybody else, and that's for damn sure because, like I said, he has connections to Marijua, the Holy Land itself, and he has celestial blood. So he was doing basically in his eyes, he was doing his like duty as not just a pirate, but as a royal, who got cast out of heaven. Hence why he is also known as the Heavenly Demon. And he was there at the War of the Best. He cut the leg off of Oris Jr. and he, played games with Crocodile. He had a skirmish with Crocodile. He was there, and then after that, he didn't show up again until after the time skip. Punk Hazard, that's when, Trafalgar Law made an alliance with Luffy. And Luffy was like, okay, I'll help you out against the four emperors. But he found out that Doflamingo was making or helping Kaido with the devil fruit, the transportation of these artificial devil fruits. He has, Caesar making the devil fruits on, Punk Hazard, and then he has, another factory on Dressrosa, his kingdom. But he was doing it, he was in cahoots with Kaido, somebody who's actually a better conqueror than he is. But Doflamingo didn't quite care about that necessarily. He cared about, and this is why his name's Joker in the underworld, because Kaido has the cards for his, first commander is king, second commander is queen. Joker was his, what a Joker is, it could be anything, you know, and he's there at Dressrosa as the king of Dressrosa, but he's also one of the seven warlords of the sea. But then the warlord system got abolished, and then him and Trafalgar Law were both, hunted down. However, Doflamingo was a king of Dressrosa, so he had that still to keep him, cool or whatever. So basically, Fujitora sided with, oh, that's what it seemed like too. Sided with, no, he sided with Doflamingo at first. Doflamingo was after Law's dick. He was gonna kill him. Because he knew that he killed his brother, Rosinante, and also his dough fruit would be useful, later on and other things. Get rid of Law, have somebody else eat it, and then he could get basically an immortality performed on him. And he would, rule over Dressers forever, But things took a turn for him. He shot Law in the chest, and Luffy was there. See, when Luffy's anywhere where a warlord's at, they're gonna lose. Unless they're like Law, and Law was cool, right? Law was like, I don't want to fight against Luffy. I want to work with him. And they were like, cool with each other, and they, had to fight against Doflamingo. Doflamingo was like, after that, my warlord status is gone. People have exposed me as this, cretin, this person who actually made Riku look bad. The secrets were coming out like crazy once Luffy was there. Um, Doflamingo, turned these people into toys. Not him himself, but like him and his family have ran shit, fucked up on this island for so long. And it's time that we take shit back. And people were like, yes, we have these people who are gung ho about helping and other things. We'll get rid of these motherfuckers. Doflamingo is like, there's no reason to like keep this place. I'll, cut this shit up. He put a bird cage up, and then everything was getting cut to pieces. His strings were so powerful that they were able to cut through, metal and all kinds of hard shit. Doflamingo had, um, man, he perfected his devil fruit to a great degree. He's an example of a like great devil fruit user. Like I wouldn't say he ain't. He's one of the great ones. He knows how to use his devil fruit right, creative with it and everything. And I ain't even like that's just one move he did, and then he like makes people move around, and shit, right? He has string bullets too. So then he like has to fight against Jaffy and Luffy, and he's fighting against them. He's able to send um Bellamy after Luffy, you know, control him, and then also fight against Law. And then after that, he gets hit with Law and Luffy's attacks, right? He got to sit down in a fucking chair. They like, yo, we need to sit the fuck down and just fucking die already, being done. And then he pops back up because he's able to regenerate his organs by basically stitching his organs back together. He had got fucked up by Law and Luffy, but then he stitches organs back together. He has what's called Devil Fruit Awakening, and he was the one who showed that. Was the first person to showcase that in the series. And Doflamingo did that, cut Law's arm off, and then Luffy was like, okay, I can't fuck around no more. Like, up until now, I've been like holding back, and he had been holding back. Luffy had been holding back. He was like, yo, I have to go into Bounce Man Gear 4 on you. I was saving this for the big boys called like Kaido and all them. But I guess I have to, send that shit out on you. And once he did that, the tables turned for Doflamingo, and he didn't have the upper hand no more. But the thing was, Luffy only had, 10 minutes, in that form. And they had another 10 minutes to recover. Doflamingo was, basically he still could have won. But, then Luffy bounced back, got into Gear 4 again, and then put Doflamingo on the ground. Destroying his glasses, too. See, that's the thing about Doflamingo. He wore glasses all the time, those pink glasses, flamingo glasses, and that pink flamingo coat. It was a show of his, like, wealth and his, like, power and all that shit. But it didn't mean anything anymore as he was getting packed up by Fujitora and, taken into Impel Down, But he still had a smile on his face, much kind of like the D's, but he's not a D, he's the opposite. See, he's a celestial dragon, or he has celestial blood, kind of like red-haired Shanks does too. But he was more, sinister, more twisted and other things. True pirate, you know, evil, twisted. He killed his own brother, that made him go even crazier and shit. Like, that made him, like, even more, gung-ho about killing everything else and, like, getting enjoyment from that. He's crazy. you know. But he's going into Impel Down. This guy, I don't know. He's probably gonna come back, but he won't be no kind of threat. Not for Luffy. Like the person in Luffy's crew that I see having a good fight with him is Jinbei and Sanji. Like they would give him a good fight. And even like defeat Doflamingo. Like on some real shit. I ain't gonna lie to y'all. I do think that Sanji and Jinbei could beat Doflamingo in 1-on-1. Um, but it wouldn't be like super easy or anything. Stream diff fights either way. But Doflamingo was a guy that, he was around, and when he was around, you just knew that he was like that and shit. When I first started watching One Piece, I thought that Doflamingo was the most powerful warlord out of all seven of them. And it looked that way for a while, but other things show other things, and he might come back if there's a prison breaking him held down, but no evidence of that yet, really. That's just, people wishful thinking. And Doflamingo does have fucking drip. And he also does have that conquer spirit. But it ain't as good as all the other conquerors, you know. But he's still like that. And I still put him in the top 30 list. Personally. He's like that. But that's the story of Doflamingo. Once a celestial, then a pirate, now, prisoner. You know, it all came to an end for him. But for a while, he was, running shit, pretty well. And it looked like nobody was going to be able to stop him. But anytime this guy's involved, the bad guys are going down. So stay cool, Corn on the Corner.